Welcome to Known and Trusted. Here we listen to a single lived story of grooming, not as a tragedy to revisit, but as wisdom to carry forward. In this one time conversation, hindsight becomes foresight, offering new eyes to see what often hides in plain sight. So, can you share a little bit about what life was like for your family before the grooming began?
Okay, I am a regular person, but I yearned for that son of mine to have a male role model because he and his father were distant, aloof. The father traveled, he was not around a lot. And so this man that came, he was a clergy member of the clergy that came into my church and had only been there a short time. And I looked up to him and he gave a persona and a history that he shared that would make any parent very happy to have their child be a part of that man's life. So for me, I went to this man and I was really, excited that he was there and I was really happy to have him and things like this. And he quickly asked me for my family, who was in my family, how many children do I have? In hindsight, that was very telling because he was provocative in a way of why did he want to know so much information about me, my children on the first day? But I let it go because of his role. And this child was my middle child, and he was visiting me for the summer. He lived with his father, was visiting me for the summer. So I was really happy to have this man take him under his wing. And from the very first day, this man was texting my son, calling my son, trying to get my son to go visit him at the rectory and things like this that I was thinking, wow, this is a little bit, wow, okay, fine. Inviting him to be with him and coming and let's go, he was going to go to a nursing home and take my son to the nursing home with him. And in the beginning, I thought, well, that's kind of cool. But one of the things, again, is in hindsight, with the grooming that I found out from the wonderful, wonderful team that helped me process this after we went to court was the fact that one of the things that these people will do, the predatory people, is they will go out of their way to separate the child from the parent emotionally. So in this, good example would have been this man's desire to get my son to visit him and then keep him for hours. So like I would say to my son, be back for dinner at 5, whatever. And 6:30, I'm still trying, well, where's my son? And there was that sense of inappropriate boundaries, just again, be home by 3, be home by 2 or whatever. There were times that he was inviting him to the rectory at 9 o'clock at night, calling in and having him go at 9 o'clock at night. And I kept thinking, why would he want to have a 16-year-old with him at 9 o'clock at night? And I'm thinking, well, they're probably just watching some old sitcom or some old movie, whatever, not knowing that he was actually plying him with, I don't even want to go down that road, but he was making my son very comfortable with his friendship. So that what he was doing without me understanding at the time was he was trying to make him the most important person in my son's life. So what he was doing was he was trying to say, oh, do you like X? Oh, I love X too. Oh, let's see if we can find whatever cops, whatever. But then there was dirty jokes. There were things that he was plying within that relationship that were basically what you would consider as a parent to be off base, but their position was to get that child to become comfortable with it so that it was not going to, like, look what we're doing. Again, drinking alcohol, having a beer, let's watch this, let's do that, which I didn't at the time know about, but it was one of those where it was almost instantaneous that I was getting the heebie-jeebies. And I was like, I don't like that he said this to you, or I don't like that he said this to me. I remember washing dishes in the kitchen one time, and he's coming into the kitchen because I was making dinner, inviting him for dinner. He said, what do you say to a woman that has a black eye? And I'm like, what? I don't know. What do you say to a woman that has a black eye? And he said, nothing. You've already told her. And I'm looking at him like, that's crazy. But he thought it was funny. So the inappropriateness of those kinds of things was constant with him. And there was one episode that was extremely vulgar and extremely way over the top. And when I confronted him, I mean confronted him big time at church the next morning, I just had my finger in his face saying, "How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you speak to my son that way? Is this the way you talk in the rectory?" And he goes, "No, no, 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 no." I said, "I allow you to have contact with him because my expectation is that you will lead him to God, that you will lead him to be a holy young man. And that's not working out. You've only been around him for 2 weeks, and I see a downward spiral, and I'm not liking it at all." And he says, "Well, didn't mean it," kind of a thing. He was 42 years old. The man was 42 years old. So this wasn't a child. This was an older man. And I remember at the time being so angry with his cavalier attitude that I literally took my finger, my pointer finger, and pointed it like almost in his nose, in his face, and said, "So help me God. If I ever find out that you've done anything to harm my son, you will never have another night's peace again." And he took a big step back, op- open, eyes open wide. And he said, "Why did you say that to me?" And I honestly looked at him and said, "I have no idea why I just said that." And I gathered my wits about me and said, "But I meant it. But I meant it." So when we went to court many years later, I'll never forget that he comes out of the back of the judge's chambers, and he's in his prison garb and stuff. And he looked at me with this glare in his eyes like he wanted to take me down. And I just looked at him like, "You have messed with the wrong mama bear." And I remembered that day in the vestibule when I had said to him, "So help me God." I remember the things that he did. He was giving my son gifts every day. Every time my son saw him, he came home with a gift. And that was totally inappropriate. But he would give him things like handcuffs and leg shackles, badges, police badges. My son wanted to be a police officer, and he alleged that he had been in the police department before. He was in the clergy, which was a lie. We found out that was a lie. It was part of his story to get my son to be his friend, and he had said he had all these friends in the CIA and FBI, and he wanted to introduce my son to all of his buddies. So that was part of his entree into my son's world, telling him he was going to take him here and take him that.
So, as I listen to this, it seems clear that your son was being singled out. He wasn't part of a group of adolescents. Is that accurate, or do I have that wrong?
Singled out. No, thank you for asking that, because I was a single mother. How I explained myself to the clergy person was, I'm a single mom. I have 3 children. Both of my boys live with their father. And at that point, my older boy had been in trouble in a minor way. By comparison to what we have today, minor trouble. And that I was grateful that we had this person in the church who would be willing, take him for coffee, whatever. And that's when I told him about the older boy. Then I told him about the middle son. And I said, this is how I introduced my middle son to him. I said, my middle son is distant from his father. He lives with him, but dad is kind of aloof, and he wants to be either a firefighter or a police officer when he grows up. And he was 16 at the time. And that's when this man said, I was a police officer. I was a probation. I was this, I was that, and I would love to meet your son. And that was how it started. That conversation right there. I'd love to meet your son.
So I would have thought that would be something that would have been a welcomed resource, especially
Absolutely.
because you're invested in your religious community. And this is one of the avenues to find mentorship and a supportive masculine role model.
Absolutely. That was exactly what I thought. And I was so grateful that this man was saying, I would love to meet your son. And there was a big party that weekend near the church, and asked if my son was going to be there. And I said, yes, actually, he is going to be there. And he said, great. You tell him to come find me. I'll be wearing an FBI hat. And that's how it started. And that from that very first day, he called every day, called 3 times a day. He would, again, just come over to my house to watch TV with my son. And he'd walk in my house and literally walk over to my TV and turn on the cops. Literally walk over, turn on cops immediately. I'm like, I don't even watch cops. What are you doing? But that's how he bonded with my son.
And you mentioned a few during that, as things progressed, that he was generous to your son. Did you experience any generosity? Was he generous towards you individually, or was it solely funneled towards your son?
No, it was totally funneled towards my son. It was, it was things like he gave him a Bible, and he gave him a crucifix. He gave him a police badges, police. Said he was part of the police department. So he was giving him different police badges from different police departments from all over the country, which I thought was odd. Again, handcuffs. And I remember this is one of my bigger issues with this man, which was, again, pretty ugly. I had said to him when he comes in with my son, and they both have the handcuffs handcuffs. My son is holding the handcuffs. Look what so and so gave me. I'm like, whoa, stop. Hold on a minute. I'm going to put the ground rules down right here now. Those handcuffs are not to touch any human or any animal. I had dogs. And my son goes, of course, Mom, of course. And of course, the man chuckles. He was just inappropriate in how he just thought that was kind of funny. I said, I'm serious. I'm dead serious. Yeah. My son put it down on the coffee table. Several days later, the three of us are inside the family room watching TV. And to my left is my son, and he's he's on the edge of the couch. And this man is across the room on a recliner, and we're watching TV. And I look up and I see the two of them looking at each other. And I can see that it's kind of a weird look, like a playful, I'm going to get you, let's, whatever. And I'm trying to read what they're doing. And suddenly the two of them jump up. The older man grabs the handcuffs that are still on the coffee table, grabs the handcuffs and goes towards my son. My son jumps up to get the handcuffs out of his hand, and they end up wrestling on the floor. I'm playing the adult in the room, telling them, get up, stop it, get up. Guys, knock it off. Guys, stop. And it ended up that my son ended up getting away from him and twisting his shoulder to the point where he pulled his shoulder out. And the guy was suddenly playing the game of, oh, I'm injured. Oh, I'm hurt. Oh, I'm this. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. But guess what? I had just made dinner. I said, but you're going to go inside and eat dinner right now. You know, we're not playing this game. You can be as injured as you want, but you're going to go inside and have dinner with us. And he pouted. He pouted through the whole dinner. And I thought, this is crazy. It's like a teenager, having two teenagers here. I said that to him at one point. I don't need another child, thank you very much. But that was how he was bonding with my son. That was in hindsight, that wrestling maneuver that day was such apparently, as I understand it in hindsight, is classic. Getting the subject, getting the child to wrestle, to have body contact where they have free for all type of contact, where they were, in that point, they were grabbing each other by the groin. I mean, they were trying to flip each other over like a wrestling match would be. At the time, I wasn't thinking, actual contact. It wasn't on my radar. But in hindsight, it was all over. I mean, putting his arm around him, like, over his shoulders a lot, like my buddy, my pal, that kind of a thing. Again, the innuendo of the jokes, the sexual innuendo in the jokes he would tell in front of me, that I would just call him on that and say, stop that. We don't speak that way in my house. All of these kinds of things were the fodder that made that fire grow into a bonfire. By the time everything broke apart, literally from the moment that he met my son until the moment that my son said, never mention his name to me again, was only 6 weeks.
Wow.
And it was,
I think we need to pause on that for a second, because this is an extremely fast-moving train.
oh yes.
From meeting to the situation coming out was 6 weeks.
6 weeks. So what he did, part of what he did, and again, in hindsight, listening to the different people's stories, he culled my son out. I was a single mother, so I was definitely fit the profile of not an intact family. My son was, in a way, he was a lonely kid. He was a good kid, a lonely kid. So he was able, as far as if you want to pick top priorities of people that you would want to have as your target, my son was we were fitting the target. And so what happened was, my son had a driver's license, and that was where he was able to get my son to drive to the rectory, drive to the whatever with him. And this was a 2-week mark of meeting this man. And he had the injury. He talked my son into picking him up and driving him to the doctor's office, which was his big thing now was, I can't drive. I need your son to help me. Okay, fine. He can take you to the doctor's office, and that's all. That's it. So what happened was, my son was gone for hours rather than an hour or two. And I'm calling this man's cell phone because my son didn't have a cell phone at the time. And cell phones were brand new and they were very expensive. And it was one of those like $500 a month for a cell phone in the time, those days. And I'm calling and there's no answer. And then I had said to my son, you take him to the doctor's and back. That's it. And I'm now mad because it's been several hours. My son answers the phone when I called this man's phone. He answered the phone and I said to him, where are you? And he said, we're at Toys R Us. I said, what are you doing at Toys R Us? And he said, we're buying Ken a dildo. I said, what are you? And I just said my son's name. I said, get home right now. And when I said that, I could hear the man like a cackle, laughing like a witch. All I could think of in the background. He thought it was hilarious. And I said, get yourself home right now, young man. And that was when he came home, and it was the next morning. that I confronted him in the vestibule, this clergy person, and said, "How dare you? How dare you?" He thought, "Tell your mother this because your mother will laugh." Like I would have thought it was a big, like, funny joke. Seriously? I mean, I don't think my son even knew what a dildo was when he said the word. I knew what it was.
So you observed him sexualizing the relationship and
Abs
bringing sexual themes into what
Yes.
should have been a mentorship relationship. Is that correct?
That's exactly. In hindsight, I didn't know what it was. I just said it was disgusting. It was terribly disgusting. And so what happened, fast forward now, he says to my son that he was from Washington, D.C. when he came to where I live. He had previously been in Washington, D.C. and needed to go back and close up his apartment and needed my son to drive. And I said no, stomped and snorted and said, absolutely not, no way, that's not going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And my son, who at the time still thought this guy was funny, thought he was a good best friend. You know, Mom, he's not that bad. Mom. I said, I don't like him at all. I'm sorry, there's something wrong here. And he said, Mom, you're just being, whatever. You're being a mom. So he begged me. He said, Mom, he's going to take me to see some of his FBI and CIA friends in Washington. I really want to go and see it. So I finally relented and I said to my son, here's the deal. You may go under one condition, and that condition is that, so help me God, if he touches you inappropriately anywhere, at any time, day or night, I don't care if it's 3 a.m, you will get away from him, you will call me, and I will come get you. It does not matter what time of the day or night it is, you call me. I said, promise me. He said, I promise you, Mom. So the weekend that he was supposed to go away was Labor Day weekend. They left at 7 o'clock on a Friday morning. They were due home on Monday night, late. And he left at 7 in the morning on Friday, and 8 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings, and it's my son. And he said, Mom, we're coming home. And I said, what's going on? What happened? Nothing. What's happening? Are you okay? I'm fine. Son, are you okay? Mom, I'm fine. We're coming home. I couldn't say anything at that point. I had to wait. They did not come home until Sunday night. And in between Washington, D.C. and where we live, he ended up taking him into the mountains and threatening to kill him several times if he said a word to me. He showed him a loaded shotgun in the trunk of his car and then tried to drive, pretended that he was going to drive off like a mountain road. They'd be on a mountain road and he'd be speeding and he'd be saying, I'm such an idiot, or I don't know why, I can't believe I did this to you, and I'm so sorry. And then I'll end it now, and pretend like he was going to be driving off the edge of a cliff. Scared the hell out of my son. Just absolutely terrified him for 2 days. And then finally arrived back home Sunday night. So I was terrified. I mean, again, my son didn't say a word to me. He didn't say anything for 3 years, but he did say, I never want to hear his name again. I never want to hear that man's name again. I knew something had happened, but it was not a good time to force it. I couldn't force it out of him. I had to wait till he was ready.
So besides the rejection of this person's name in the house, what else did you observe in your child?
I observed in him really more of just an anger, a seething, like an under the surface seething anger in him for quite a while because he felt so betrayed. And it was absolutely landmines. I could not even think of approaching the subject. He did not want to go back to that church. He wanted nothing to do with my church after that.
Somebody listening who is maybe a member of a congregation and might be thinking, well, how would I notice something going on with my child? That sudden change that you just highlighted about, I suddenly don't want anything to do with this congregation or this building or these leaders within this church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He wanted nothing to do with it. My son is now 43 years old and still doesn't go to church. He stopped altogether. He has a lovely marriage, lovely children, but it is one of those that it affected him deeply. And his wife is working on him going to a totally different congregation, totally different. They're working on that now, but it broke him. It broke him. It did.
What is something that you would like to share with somebody listening today who maybe doesn't know anything about grooming, and shed a little light on your perspective with what's something you wish someone had taught you all those decades ago about the grooming process?
Well, I will say that I really believe in my heart of hearts that God gave me the ability to pick it up quickly, because in all honesty, almost from day one, I had a sixth sense. So if I were to say anything to anybody, because I have spoken to other people, other parents who've been through similar situations, who didn't know anything for years. Many of them have a child who's now in their 30s who's angry because, Mom, you never knew. You never did anything. And the mom would say, I didn't know. I didn't know. And that child, for whatever reason, has harbored a grudge against the parent because the parent didn't speak up. So for me, the one thing I will say is that trust your gut and be aware of the it's hard now. Things have changed so much. But back when that happened, it was not a big deal to have a coach or somebody be friendly and touch a child. Now the parameters, the boundaries are much more firm. You would never have an adult and a child alone together anymore, pretty much. At least not in the church situations that I belong to. I'm just saying at the time it was one of those, I was such an outlier because I sensed something was wrong, and people would be like, "Oh, come on. Oh, he's just being friendly." I will tell you, as my heart says and shouts, trust your gut. There's times that you're going to have a man put his arm around your son and it's not even going to faze you. But there's that sense that all of a sudden, like, that did not feel right. That's what I really honestly knew immediately, that there was something different about this man. There was something about the way he spoke to my son, the way he spoke to me, the way he spoke in front of me, that was not appropriate. That, and now we would say boundary violation. I'm just saying at the time, I just felt very, it sounds stupid to say this, icky. I just felt like there was something about this guy that just did not sit right. And because of that, I was on high alert the whole time. I really did feel as though he crossed boundaries too frequently, too easily, that there was something there, and I didn't know what it was. But I'm just grateful that my son did call me. They were supposed to be spending the night at a friend's house, one of this man's friend's houses. It was actually a single mom. Sorry to say that, but it's a single mom in outside of Washington. And the sleeping arrangement ended up being, we only have this one bedroom and share a bed. And my son is like, no, 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 we're not sharing a bed. And the woman, believe it or not, was like, oh, that's not a big deal. And my son's like, no, this is a big, no, 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 I'll sleep on the floor. So they went back and forth, the man and my son, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. My son says, I'll sleep on the floor. No, 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 I'll sleep on the floor. No, I'll sleep on the floor. So the man finally got my son to agree, you can have the bed, I'll sleep on the floor. So my son was in the bed. The man was on the floor. In the middle of the night, he found the guy in the bed, getting into bed with him and fondling him, trying to fondle him. And my son just jumped out of bed and said, take me home now. So apparently, thank you, God, my son had enough courage to literally refuse to go to sleep, refuse to let things go. And the only thing that he would agree to is that he would stay awake until sun came up. But as soon as the sun came up, they were leaving. So that's why I got the phone call right around 8 o'clock. We were coming home, because he would have wanted to leave like at 3 a.m. when the man came into the bed. But the man said, you'll wake the whole house up. And that was how he ended up just putting his foot down and being firm. And I'm just grateful that my son had the courage to do that, is to say, not going to happen. And he literally called me and said, we're coming home. And that's all he would say to me, is we're coming home.
It also illuminates for me as I listen to that just how successful grooming as a process is. That it does build this sense that I can rely on you. You're my friend. We're connected. You're going to protect me. You've got my back. And then when that betrayal happens, as it did away on this trip, that it hurts that much more when you have built and established a trustworthy relationship with this individual.
Yeah. And so clearly, in this case, he was building up his relationship, his past relationship with high level police people, in order to gain my son's trust, that he was going to introduce him to so and so and so and so and this and that. So my son's sense of anticipation and sense of eagerness to be on this trip with this man was shattered in an instant, shattered. And I'm just grateful again that my son was strong enough to say, I'm out of here, rather than back down or feel like because I think to myself, God forbid he had been a younger child and he didn't have the wherewithal and felt like he had to, which is what happens a lot of times. Children they're feeling like they don't have the power to stop it, and they have to put up with it. And then the compounding of the guilt then that they have somehow contributed to this relationship or whatever. It just, in my situation, the gratitude I do have is that my son did stop it immediately, and he was adamant, this, not even, don't even come near me again. And he did, literally. So that situation where he came back on Sunday night, I didn't speak anything, but within 2 weeks later, he was visiting me again. And he literally brought into the house a cell phone, a Nextel cell phone. If you remember what those things were, the walkie talkie cell phones. And he walks into my house, goes to the famous cocktail table, and shows me the Nextel phone and slams it onto the coffee table and looks at me with defiance. I'm like, excuse me, what's going on here? And he said, nothing. And he sat down, like with his arms across his chest, and he's waiting. And all of a sudden, the the phone crackles and this person's calling my son by his name. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And I'm looking at my son and I said, are you going to answer the phone? He goes, no. Okay. And so this clergy person kept calling my son's name and calling his name and calling his name for 2 days. This is a phone that the clergy person gave my son.
I think that's a really important detail for anybody listening, because typically those gifts are about increasing access to that targeted child. And the cell phone as a direct link. We're not going to go through your mom or your dad. I'm going to go straight to you.
Exactly. He knew that my ex-husband would not tolerate a phone call, all the phone calls that were coming in. So what he did was he handed my son a phone, which at the time, again, average phone bill was $500 a month. Where he got the money that's ridiculous. But he gave my son this phone so that he could speak to my son while he was at my ex-husband's house. And now my son had enough, right? He brings the phone into my house, puts it onto my coffee table, and looks at me with defiance as if to say, like, watch this, Mom. And that's within 10 minutes or less. The thing is squawking. Pick up the phone. Hello, I'm here. Called my son by name. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. And I'm looking at my son laughing, kind of going, what the heck is that all about? And he just smiled at me and no. So that was so when that happened and that phone died on Sunday, I finally said to my son, all right, I've had it. I've had it. Tell you what, I think it's time to go to the pastor. And he goes, oh, fine by me, Mom. And this is the guy who thought this man hung the moon 2 weeks ago. I said, okay, so it's okay with you if I go to the pastor? He said, absolutely. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Okay. So I picked up the phone and held it up and said, can I give him the phone also? He said, absolutely. I went to the pastor the next day. I called the pastor up and said, I'd like to see you. And he said, I can fit you in about 2 weeks. I said, no, you need to fit me in today. We're going to talk.
Mama Bear.
Mama Bear. And he said, oh, okay. Come to my office at 7 o'clock tonight. I said, I'll see you then. And at that point, I started writing down all the that's odds. Again, like I said in the beginning, I had been writing these little stupid things, the little jokes he said, the weird things that he did, all first person. Every bit of it was something I witnessed myself. None of it was innuendo or something from somebody else. It was all directly from me. I witnessed it myself. And I had 2 pages, 2 legal pad, 2 sides of a legal pad. And I just read them off to the pastor that night saying, he did this, he said this, he did this, he did this that night. I said, he used to have no contact with me or my family at all on any level. And the pastor said, I agree.
Time, were you aware of any other young people that this behavior was also showing up with?
At the time, well, I'll back up a little bit. The phone with the phone that died, one of the things that happened was my house phone rang at one point and I answered it. And there was a 10-year-old boy that I knew in our church. I'll call him Mikey. And he says, hi, Miss So-and-so. This is Mikey. Can I talk to my son's name? And I said, why would he call my son? My son's 16. I said, well, can I give him a message? And he said, yes, please tell him that so-and-so wants him to call, which was the clergy guy called. So I said, thank you very much. I'll let my son know. So I told my son, what the heck is going on here? He's having a 10-year-old call you? That was part of the conversation where I said, okay, I'm done. Okay, you know what? We have reached a new level that I say is out of bounds. And that's when he said, go ahead, go to the pastor. So to this day, I don't know, the other child was not part of the court case. There were 2 when we finally went to court. My son came up 3 years later, admitted what had happened and came to me. And I went to the Archbishop. I'm Catholic, went to the Archbishop, and the Archbishop thankfully said, go to the police. This is something that you need to take to the police. I did immediately. Another couple came forward. They had twin boys. Their boys were 12 years old when my son was 16. So their boys had relationship or met this man who had the inappropriateness. And so here's another one. The mother put the kibosh on that situation when that man took the twins to Hooters for lunch one day. She said,
Unthinkable.
And they were, so there was the court case was my son plus the twin 12-year-olds. In my heart of hearts, I believe there was always something with that 10-year-old also that never came forward. I think there were others too, but that caused me to literally be terrified of that situation. And that's where I just said to my son, we're over the top now. This has got to, I have to go to the pastor.
Speak to
Yes.
anybody who might be listening about maybe a word of encouragement or some mantra that they can rely on if they're considering reporting.
Absolutely. Trust your gut is one, and two, I will never forget that when my son finally admitted to me that this had happened, the first words out of my mouth was, "I always knew." And he's like, "You did, and you didn't say anything to me?" And I said, "I knew that you had to wait till you were ready." And he thanked me for giving him the for believing him, never questioning it, and giving him the space that he needed. Because what that allowed then was he was strong enough that when we went forward with the police right away, he knew I had his back. There was no question. I had his back, and he was so grateful for that. It took us a whole year to go through the court system. I would encourage any parent: A, trust your gut; B, know your child; but C, do not ever back off either. When I looked at that man that day and said, "So help me God, if I find out you've done anything to hurt my child, you will never have another night's peace," I lived up to that promise. And I know that I will go to my grave being very grateful that God gave me the strength to do it.
Well, I'm very grateful to you today for being here to share your story, what your family's gone through, what your son went through, so that somebody listening somewhere, whether it's a clerical person or not, that your wisdom can offer some sort of education. And I'm extremely grateful for your courage and your bravery to be a part of Known and Trusted and use your story to help protect another child somewhere.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
This was an episode of Known and Trusted. Thank you for listening with care to a story that was once lived in silence. If it opened your eyes, share it with somebody you trust, because every conversation is a step toward protecting the next child. To learn more or to share your own story, visit annasonoda.com. Together, we can turn awareness into action.